Okay, welcome to the next video in the series Investing in the US residential real estate market. Today we're going to look at Orlando neighborhoods. And effectively, we're going to look at three key areas. Firstly, is the Orlando metropolitan area a decent area from an investment perspective? Secondly, we're going to look at the Trulia heat map and look at it and show how it can guide us both from a macro level in terms of looking at Florida and the areas where there's the highest buyer interest, and then secondly look at the Orlando area by neighborhood and use it to show us where are the better priced neighborhoods, and then see if there's a correlation between those better priced neighborhoods and where the most activity is at this point in time. Then lastly, we're going to step into some of these neighborhoods to see if is there any other useful information to be gleaned by going into the neighborhood on a micro level. Okay, let's kick it off. Okay, so from a metropolitan perspective, keep in mind that we only invest in areas that have in excess of 500,000 population. Now, when we look at the Orlando, Kissimmee, and Sanford metropolitan area, we see that it has in excess of 2.1 million people. That's good. And we see that it has actually increased in terms of numbers by almost 30% from 2000 to 2010 in terms of the growth in population. This is really just a visual on where that area is located. So we've got Sanford, we've got Orlando, and indeed we've got Kissimmee. When we look at the greater Orlando area in detail, just a couple of facts pop up. In terms of the size of the metropolitan area, it's the third biggest in Florida. It's the fifth largest in the Southeast, and it's the 27th largest in the US. So as metropolitan areas go, it's a very decent sized metropolitan area. Secondly, when we look at the commerce side of things, really we just bring in this information to ensure that many potential investors are aware that it's not just tourism and retirement that happens in Orlando. There's a number of other key industries that actually are undertaken in that area. Here are some of the top employers within the within Orlando, just from a reference perspective. And now we're going to move into the heat maps. So basically what we're seeing here is the level of buyer interest in particular in all of Florida, where basically we're looking at the red and graduated red areas as being the areas that have most interest, and the green, very dark green, being the areas where there's little interest in terms of buyer activity. So we see then that when we look at our area, which is the Orlando area, what we see is here we see that there is significant buyer interest both in Orlando and then both Sanford and Kissimmee to a somewhat lesser extent. Looking then at the Orlando area and looking at it from a heat map perspective, looking at the individual neighborhoods, we see, I suppose, two key things. Firstly, what we would refer to as the Goldilocks approach. We don't want an area that's too hot from a pricing perspective, and indeed we don't want an area that's too cold from a pricing perspective. So we're trying to avoid the red and graduated red areas, and indeed the very green areas. Secondly, we're looking at essentially the path of progression. Now we see here that this area here is one of the highest average price area of Orlando, as is this area down here. The question is this, is once those areas begin to spill over and we get some sort of ripple effect where people are priced out of those markets and start looking at lesser priced areas, and then gradually bring those lesser priced areas up in terms of value. The question is, which way will it potentially go? And this is not an exact science, but if we look at this area here, possibly we could see that spill over into the northwest area, and possibly a little bit down going south here. And indeed here, again, possibly we would see that spillover again in the north, in the northwest area, and again possibly pushing northwards here. That said, so what we're seeing is the lighter areas and the greens are the areas where the average sales price is somewhere between low to medium. Okay, and they're the areas we're more interested in. Now, the second step is really those areas that have low to intermediate average sales prices. Is there any interest currently in those areas from a buyer's perspective? When we take the same neighborhoods and look at the level of buyer activity in those neighborhoods in terms of searching, potential buying, all of that stuff, we see that the same neighborhoods that were light yellow and green are showing an excessive amount of interest from a buyer's perspective, as you can see here. That's good. So we're seeing a little bit of a trend there in terms of where buyers' focus seems to be, and you know, the trend is your friend. Let's not try and go against that trend. From that, we've highlighted some, by no means all, neighborhoods that certainly on the face of it look quite interesting. And so we have the likes of Pine Hills. It's the third most popular neighborhood in terms of looked at and searched on. It's coming in at $29 per square foot on average and has a median sales price of just under $30,000. And then we see Lockhart with similar stats, Fairview Shores, Inglewood, Rosemount, and indeed Lake Frederica. So they're potential neighborhoods that are worth a second look in a little bit more detail. Now, when we look at some of these neighborhoods in a little bit more detail, essentially what we're seeing is we're seeing we take a couple of bits of information from what we see here. So Pine Hills, essentially a couple of things come to mind is that if you look at the pricing back in 2000, certainly in and around $60 a square foot, currently closer to $30 a square foot. So it certainly it has ballooned between 2000 and say 2007, 2008, and then seriously come off the boil. And as most markets tend to, they on the upside they over exaggerate the increase, and then on the downside they overcompensate. That's the first thing. Second thing, and this is more a question rather than a statement. The question is this: are we seeing the semblance of some sort of bottom happening here in terms of the market when we look at the graph here? A couple of other points. Looking at 5 years previous, this neighborhood, Pine Hills, sold for on average $125 a square foot, currently selling at $30 a square foot, which means that we're looking at a discount of about 76% in the neighborhood, or we're buying homes at 24 cents on the dollar. When we compare it to the Orlando market in total, we're seeing a 50% drop from prices of 5 years ago to current average prices per square foot. So we're looking at about a 24% drop in addition to where Orlando has actually gone to. I suppose the question has to be asked is, at 24 cents on the dollar, can this particular neighborhood fall significantly further? Now, it's a judgment call. My feeling is probably not a lot more, to be honest, but it is a judgment call going forward. We look at a second neighborhood, Lockhart. The current average price, $53 a square foot. Again, just a couple of points to observe. 2000 prices over here, looking at around about $65 plus. Current prices, we're looking at around $52, $53. Again, question is, are we seeing potentially a bit of a bottoming here? May not be the bottom yet, but again, when we start looking at the 5 years history on this, $142 for Lockhart versus today $53 on average per square foot. We're looking at a 63% discount, or buying properties in this neighborhood at 37 cents on the dollar. versus a 50% drop in the Orlando market. That said, can I say thanks very much indeed for having a quick look at Orlando neighborhoods. Keep your eyes open for more videos coming over the next couple of weeks. Until then, look forward to speaking with you at a later date. Take care. Bye for now.